I used to work the night shift at a small gas station outside town, and one customer started showing up every night around the same time. The night I realized something was seriously wrong. I was standing behind the counter around 3 in the morning when I looked outside and saw the same car parked at pump number 2. The strange thing was, it had already been there earlier that night, and I watched it leave, but now it was back, and this time, the driver wasn't inside the car. This happened about 5 years ago, when I was working nights at a small gas station just outside a rural town. It wasn't a busy place. During the day there were plenty of customers, truck drivers, commuters, people passing through, but at night it was different. After midnight, the road outside became almost completely empty. Sometimes an hour would pass without a single car. The gas station sat along a long stretch of highway, surrounded by fields and trees. There were no houses nearby. No restaurants. Just the gas station, the road, and miles of darkness. Inside the building there was a small store area, a counter with a register. 2 aisles with snacks and drinks, and a coffee machine that almost nobody used after midnight. Most nights were incredibly quiet. I usually spent the time watching videos on my phone or cleaning shelves. The only rule my manager gave me about the night shift was simple. Lock the side door after midnight. And if anything feels strange, call the police. At the time, that sounded a little dramatic, but after a few weeks working there, I started to understand why. The first time I noticed the car was on a Tuesday night. It was around 1 in the morning. I was restocking the cooler when I heard a car pull into the parking lot. That wasn't unusual. Late night drivers stop for gas all the time. I walked back behind the counter and looked through the front window. A dark sedan had pulled up to pump number 2. The engine stayed running for a moment before shutting off, but the driver didn't get out. I watched for a few seconds, waiting for the person to step out and start pumping gas, but nothing happened. The car just sat there. Lights off. Engine off. After about a minute, the driver's door finally opened. A man stepped out slowly. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap. Even from the window, something about the way he moved felt strange. Slow. Careful. Like he was thinking about every step. Instead of going to the pump, he walked toward the store. When he opened the door, the small bell above it rang. He stepped inside and looked around the empty gas station. Then he looked directly at me. For a moment he didn't say anything. He just stared. Not angry, not smiling, just staring. Then he finally spoke. Coffee still hot? His voice sounded calm, but there was something slightly off about it, like he wasn't used to talking to people. Yeah, I said. Fresh pot. He nodded slowly and walked toward the coffee machine. I watched him pour a cup. His movements were quiet. Almost too quiet, like he didn't want to make noise. He brought the coffee to the counter and placed a few coins down. Exact change. He never broke eye contact while I rang it. Up. Then he picked up the cup and left. The doorbell rang again as he stepped outside. A few seconds later, I heard his car start. Then he drove away. The entire interaction probably lasted less than 2 minutes. But for some reason, the gas station felt different after he left, quieter than before. I didn't think about it much until the next night. Because around 1 in the morning, the same car pulled into the parking lot again, and the same man stepped out. The next night, the same car pulled into the parking lot again. At first, I didn't think much of it. People pass through the same roads every day. Maybe he worked somewhere nearby. Maybe he just liked stopping for coffee. But something about the timing felt strange. It was almost exactly the same time as the night before. 1:03. The dark sedan rolled slowly toward pump number 2 again. It stopped in the same spot. The engine stayed running for a few seconds, then shut off. Just like the night before. I watched from behind the counter. Again, the driver didn't get out right away. The car just sat there, still, quiet. About 30 seconds later, the driver's door opened. The same tall man stepped out. Same dark jacket, same baseball cap, same slow movements. He walked toward the door of the store. The bell rang as he entered. Again, he looked around the empty gas station before looking at me. Then he walked to the coffee machine. Without saying a word, he poured himself a cup. Same as yesterday. When he reached the counter, he placed the coins down. Exact change again. Then he finally spoke. Quiet night? Yeah, I said. Usually is. He nodded slowly. Then he picked up the coffee, and just like the night before, he stared at me for a few seconds before leaving. The bell rang. The door closed. A moment later, I heard his car start and drive away. It should have been a normal interaction, but something about it stuck in my mind. Mostly the way he watched me, like he was studying me. The third night is when things started to feel wrong. That night had been extremely slow. I hadn't seen a single customer for almost 2 hours. Around midnight, I locked the side door like I always did. Then I sat behind the counter, scrolling through my phone. At exactly 1:03, I heard tires roll onto the gravel. Outside, I already knew what I was about to see. When I looked up, the same dark sedan was pulling toward pump number 2. My stomach dropped a little. The car stopped, engine running. Then silence. Again, the driver waited, longer this time, maybe a full minute. Finally, the door opened. The same man stepped out, but this time, he didn't walk toward the store right away. He stood next to his car, looking at the building. Looking at the windows. For a moment I thought he might leave, but then he slowly started walking toward the entrance. The bell rang as he stepped inside. The gas station suddenly felt very small. Very quiet. He walked straight to the coffee machine again, but this time he didn't pour the coffee right away. Instead, he turned his head slightly, and looked toward the back hallway. The hallway led to the storage room, and the employee bathroom. Customers weren't allowed back there. There was even a small sign that said employees only. He stared at the hallway for a few seconds. Then he turned back to the coffee machine and poured his cup. When he came to the counter, he didn't put the coins down immediately. Instead, he asked something strange. "Do you work here every night?" The question caught me off guard. "Most nights," I said. He nodded slowly, then he placed the exact coins on the counter again. "Must get lonely?" I shrugged. "You get used to it." He smiled slightly, but it didn't feel like a friendly smile, more like he was thinking about something. Then he picked up his coffee, but instead of leaving right away, he stood near the door. Looking outside through the window, almost like he was waiting for something or someone. After about 20 seconds, he finally left. The bell rang. The door shut. And a moment later, his car drove away. I remember feeling relieved when the parking lot was empty again, but that feeling didn't last very long, because about 10 minutes later, I heard a car slowly pulling back into the parking lot again. When I looked outside, the same dark sedan was rolling back toward pump number 2. The same dark sedan was rolling back toward pump number 2. My first thought was that maybe he forgot something, maybe his coffee. Maybe his wallet. But something about the way the car moved felt different this time. Slower. Almost cautious. The car stopped again at the pump. But this time, the engine stayed running, the headlights stayed on, and the driver didn't get out. I watched from behind the counter for almost a full minute. Nothing happened. The car just sat there. Lights shining across the empty parking lot. Finally, the engine shut off. The headlights went dark, and the driver's door opened. The man stepped out again. But this time he didn't walk toward the store. Instead, he walked around the side of the building. My stomach tightened immediately. Customers never went that way. There was nothing over there. Just the side wall of the gas station and the locked employee door. I leaned forward slightly, trying to see through the side window, but from where I stood, I couldn't see the corner of the building. He had completely disappeared from view. For a moment I considered walking outside, but the rule my manager told me came back to mind. If something feels strange, don't go looking for trouble. So I stayed behind the counter, watching the door, listening. The gas station suddenly felt too quiet. The hum of the refrigerators, the ticking of the clock above the register. Every small sound felt louder than usual. About 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Still nothing. I started wondering if he had just gone behind the building to smoke, or maybe used the bathroom outside. But then I remembered something. The employee door on the side of the building. That door led straight into the back hallway, the one with the storage room and the employee bathroom. But I locked that door every night at midnight. I was sure of it. I always checked it twice. Still, the thought made me uneasy. I stepped out from behind the counter and slowly walked toward the back hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above me. Everything looked normal. The hallway was empty. But when I looked at the employee door at the end of the hall, My stomach dropped. The door was slightly open, just a few inches, but enough to see the darkness. Outside, I stopped walking. For a moment I just stared at the door, trying to remember if I had unlocked it earlier. But I knew I hadn't. I always kept that door locked at night. Always. A cold feeling crept into my chest. Because if the door was open now, that meant someone had opened it, and the only person outside the building was that man. I slowly walked closer to the door. My footsteps sounded too loud in the empty hallway. Each step made my heart beat harder. When I reached the door, I gently pushed it closed. Then I checked the lock. It clicked into place. Locked. For a moment I stood there listening. The night air outside was completely silent. No footsteps. No movement. I walked back to the front of the store and looked out the window again. The dark sedan was still parked at pump number 2, but now the driver's door was open. The man wasn't inside the car, and he wasn't walking toward the store, which meant only one thing. He was somewhere around the building, possibly very close. My heart started beating faster. I picked up my phone and considered calling my manager, or even the police, but I hesitated. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just walking around the building for some reason. Then something happened that made my blood run cold. The bell above the front door suddenly rang, but the door hadn't opened. It moved slightly, just enough to make the bell ring, like someone had touched it. From the outside, I stared at the door, waiting. Slowly, the handle began to turn. The handle began to turn. Very slowly. For a moment I couldn't move. I just stared at the door, watching the metal handle shift downward a few millimeters at a time. My heart was beating so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The door opened a few inches. The bell rang softly, but no one stepped. Inside, I waited. Seconds passed. Nothing. Then, the door slowly opened the rest of the way, and the man stepped. Inside, he looked exactly the same as before. Same jacket. Same baseball cap. But this time, his eyes moved slowly around the store. Looking at everything. The aisles. The windows. The hallway behind me. Then he looked directly at me again. Thought you? Closed. My mouth felt dry. We're open all night. He nodded slowly, but this time he didn't walk to the coffee machine. Instead, he walked halfway into the store and stopped, standing there in the middle of the floor. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavy, like the entire building was holding its breath. Then he asked something strange. You're here alone tonight? Every alarm bell in my head went off, but I tried to keep my voice calm. No, manager's in the back. It was a lie, a very obvious lie. I hoped it would make him leave. Man tilted his head slightly, like he was thinking about that answer. Then he glanced toward the hallway. Again, the same hallway he had stared at earlier. For a few seconds he didn't move. Then he finally walked toward the counter. But instead of stopping at the register, he leaned slightly forward, looking directly at his voice was quiet. Almost curious. You sure about That? My hands were shaking slightly behind the counter, but I forced myself to nod. Yeah, for a moment I thought he might say something else, but instead, he suddenly smiled, a small, strange smile. Then he stepped back, walked to the coffee machine, and poured himself another cup. The entire time he stood there, I kept watching the door, hoping he would leave. When he came back to the counter, he placed the same exact coins down again. I didn't even look at them. I just rang it up automatically, picked up the cup. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. I like this place. I didn't respond. He took a sip of the coffee, still staring at me. Then he slowly walked toward the door. Again, the bell rang as he stepped outside. The door closed behind him. And for a few seconds, I just stood there, frozen. Then, I quickly walked to the window and looked outside. The man got back into his car. The engine started, the headlights turned on, and the sedan slowly pulled out of the parking lot. This time, he didn't come back. At least not that night. The next morning when my manager arrived, I told him everything about the man, the car, the door in the back hallway. He didn't look surprised, not even a little. Instead, he sighed and walked to the office. A minute later, he came back with a small folder. Inside were printed security photos. He placed them on the counter in front of. You're not the first person to report him, he said. I looked down at the photos. They showed the same dark sedan parked at the pumps. Different nights, different employees working the shift, but the same man every time. Manager tapped one of the photos. This goes back almost 6 months. I felt a chill run down my spine. Why? Didn't anyone call the police? My manager hesitated. Then he said something that I still think about sometimes. They did. I frowned. What happened? He looked at the photo again, then back at Watto. They never found. I felt a knot in my stomach. But he's been coming here every night. My manager shook his head. Slowly. No. Then he pointed at the date on the oldest photo, and that's when I realized something that still doesn't make sense to me. The man in the pictures had been showing up for months, but the car in the photos was reported stolen over a year ago, and the person who owned it had been missing ever since. Asterisk, asterisk.